taking students on an inquiry journey. It's really important to start packing the car, so we've got what we need for the journey. Then after a while we're going to need to refuel and rev it up again. Then when motivation is really high, we want to make sure that students are choosing a purposeful destination and mapping out their way there. Finally, once the purpose has been achieved, then it's time to decide where to go now. Let's take a closer look. First up, packing the car. What does that actually mean? It means identifying the specific learning outcomes that are going to come out of the inquiry, and we do it so that everyone's clear and consistent on the most important part of the inquiry, and that is the learning we want our students to gain from it. And how do we pack the car? By identifying the big ideas, the knowledge, the driving questions, vocabulary, and how we will assess that students have understood. And once we've packed the car, we start the engine and take off. And that means that we get the kids excited, we build on their prior knowledge and expose them to new contexts and knowledge. And it's important because students don't know what they don't know, and we want them to start making good connections and find those areas that intrigue them most. And how do we do all of that? By planning some really engaging and interesting activities that will expose the kids to lots of different contexts, help them make connections between the old and new knowledge as well as between the contexts, and get them co-constructing some new knowledge by working with other students. And finally, reflecting on their growing understanding of the big ideas. And now we've started the engine and taken off, after a while we need to refuel and rev up. And that involves questions that make kids go, and really think about and test out their new knowledge and deepen their understanding, because the questions require them to think in lots of different ways. And how do we do all that? We use what I call driving questions. They're questions that aren't Googleable, don't have a single or simple answer. They can almost be an inquiry journey on their own, largely because they can get students going beyond just knowing towards using that information in new and different ways. And driving questions involve critical, creative and caring thinking. Next up, once students have found their passion and motivation, we help them choose a purposeful destination. What does that mean? It means finding a meaningful and relevant purpose to work towards. And having a purpose for inquiry is important because in the real world it's often that we have a purpose or outcome that we need to achieve, while also giving them clarity, direction and meaning. And how do we support students to do that? We get them diving deeper into contexts that are in and around the big ideas, while they're looking for things like a problem or situation that they could try and find a new solution, fix or improvement for, or a situation, opportunity or event that they could create a new idea, a new design, a new product or a new plan for. Another purpose is getting them to find an issue, event or controversy that they could judge, make a decision around or give their opinion about. As I mentioned earlier, it might be a driving question they want to explore further. And once they have a purpose, they need to map out and make their way towards it, which involves making and following a plan. And it's really important that that plan involves getting the students to think about what they're doing, find the information they need from reliable sources, and thinking deeply. How do we do that? Either by using the school inquiry model, or maybe a simple thinking strategy where students think first, think facts, and think deeply. And once the journey's through and the purpose has been achieved, it's time to decide where to go next. And that involves deciding if there's more that students want and can actually do with what they've come up with. Often, the project and end result has got real considerable meaning for the kids, so they'll have something that they'd like to do with it or from it. And we support them to identify what they'd like to do with what they've ended up with by getting them to think about things like seeing if there's someone who'd want or need to hear about what you've come up with, or there might be a related purpose that you could take on, or perhaps there's an action you could take. And finally, there might just be time to celebrate the learning that's gone on. And the final element of an inquiry journey are the pit stops. And by pit stops, we mean time to self, peer and teacher assess for learning, time to reflect back and plan forward, time for metacognition, and finally, a pit stop to focus on goals. So summing up, taking students on an inquiry journey means we pack the car, start the engine and take off, refuel and rev up, choose a purposeful destination, map out and make our way there, and decide where to go now. And for schools that are using my localised curriculum framework, you can find support to pack the car on slides 2 and 7, to start the engine and take off on slides 3 and 4, to refuel and rev up on slide 5, and to choose a purposeful destination and map out your way, you can find them on slide 6. And don't forget to check out all the teacher notes as well. Ka kite!